It's been 24 years, 9 months, and 19 days since I said yes to leading with a passion. This is Benjamin Stewart, and you're listening to my podcast, Leading from the Edge. Well, good day, everyone. It's a stormy day up on the mountain, and as best as I can do, I try to make it so you don't hear the rain or the thunder in the background. But if you do, hopefully you'll just think of that as beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us today. The last 3 weeks, we've talked about hitting the ceiling. This is part 3, technically part 4. And so far, we've talked about two of the traits that we need in order to break through those times in our businesses or our churches or our personal lives where we feel stuck, where we feel like we've walked around the same mountain over and over and over again. I mean, think about it. We always, as leaders, want to climb straight up, right? But when you lead a team, you have to move around the mountain most of the time. And it's a tough place to be. And we've all been there, stuck at some point, feeling like we're hitting the ceiling, feeling like things are not really shaping out the way that we want them to be. Or maybe you're there right now. It's where you feel like things are just ordinary, or where you feel like it's okay, but it's just not great. And it's the part of us as leaders that cannot stand the status quo, right? But how do we move on from here? How do we get back into growth? And so far in the last 3 podcasts, we talked about the first 2 traits. We talked about simplifying, to quit making everything so complicated. What are your priorities? What's your core vision? What is your core focus? Start measuring everything around that, literally everything. And if it's outside of that, then you're likely getting frustrated because you don't have the time or the energy or the results from what you're doing. So simplify your church back to what God told you to do, right? Or simplify your business back to what your core focus is. Or simplify your family back to what the vision is for your family. Or just simplify your day as a person back to your why and what your priorities really are. The second thing that we went over was delegate and elevate. We broke this across a couple podcasts because we want to talk about operating in areas that we don't like and aren't good at, right? Or even better, why operate in areas that we don't like, but maybe we are good at. And so we put together a little practice, an exercise on how to make sure that you're listing everything that you've done in your job or you do in your job or your business, your life, and you start categorizing them. That way you can know what you should be delegating. And then we went into practical steps of how to make sure that you're living a life that has margin. Margin so that you can have the energy that God has put in front of you, the stuff that God has placed in front of you for you to do. I heard a great conversation being accounted for by a believer. You could say it was a conversation between them and God. And it went something like this. God, why is it that you move in mountains and valleys? Why is it that I feel like everything is an ebb and a flow? Like, God, you speak a lot sometimes and then you're absolutely quiet. And then God replied back and said, that's not me, that's you. It's because you get tired, because you get discouraged, because you wear yourself out. So I give you time to rest. Wow, can you imagine if we were able to live a life of rest? What if we really took a day off of the pressures of this life and recharged? I mean, don't even get me started about the Sabbath and how Americans have ignored this commandment at a very high level, right? Our Sundays, we end up filling with not just church, but a lot of other stuff. And we have very little time of recharging and resting. Anyways, it brings us back to our next leadership trait that we need in order to break through the ceiling. how to get out of stuck and back into growth. So if you're taking notes, the third trait is the ability to predict. Are you frustrated because you seem like you're always putting out the same fires, or you feel like you're always in reaction mode, having to respond to something that's happened? Or do you ever feel like you're only getting 1 out of 10 things done for your business or for your life? Well, the ability to predict is probably one of the most misunderstood qualities, because most of us think about it and we think, well, we're not prophets. How can we predict anything, right? How do we even tell what the future is going to be? Well, when I go through these 3 practical steps to predicting, I think it's really going to help you out. And here's what they are. The first one is setting goals. Second one is having discipline. And the third one is revisiting the goals regularly and in high frequency. So let's break that down. The first one is to set goals. I'm going to call these rocks because that's kind of what EOS talks about. Gino Wickman has coined that phrase. And actually, Steve Covey is the one who brought it out. If you've read any of his books, he talks about it in 3 or 4 of them, I believe. He talks about, he set aside on the table a bunch of rocks, a bunch of pebbles, a pile of sand, and a cup of water. And he put it right next to an empty glass jar. And so he talked about that when you put the sand in first, which is like your habits and your behaviors, and then you put the pebbles in, the things that you do on a regular basis, right? The things you just have to get done every day. And then you put the rocks in. Those are those bigger things that need more time and more energy. You end up running out of room. For one, you don't have enough room for the water, and you don't have much room for the rocks. In fact, typically you only put 1 rock in. It means you're running out of the stuff that you really want to get done, and the water is kind of just the fun part, right? But when you put the rocks in the jar first, and then you put the pebbles, and then you put the sand, and then you put the water in, miraculously, it all fits. It's the same exact amount of stuff, but it's been placed in the right priority. And that is a huge lesson for us as leaders. We have to set goals and then make them a priority. Otherwise, we end up only having the time and the energy for our habits, for our behaviors, and our normal work. And speaking as a father, how often have we missed out on what's best for our families because we didn't make them a priority, right? And that's what makes us feel stuck. That's when you set those goals and you never prioritize them, and they just don't happen. So the first goal is to set the goals and make them for 90 days. Why 90 days? Well, because if you make a yearly goal, you have a 1 in 10 shot of that actually happening, right? But if you set up in 90 days, they talk about it. If you set goals in 90-day increments, you have a 6x probability of getting it done. And so here's an example. It's not quite the 90 days, but I recently set a goal of sticking to a diet and routine for 75 days. Why? Well, 1, I need to be healthier. Yes, absolutely. 2, I need to lose some weight. Yeah, I need to lose some weight. But more specifically, I realized in even talking about this podcast, I need to have more discipline. And so we put together this group of men who are choosing to do this special discipline exercise for 75 days straight. And how we're making sure that we're going to follow that in discipline is that we're making sure that we're accountable to each other, but also if we miss one part of it, we start over at day 1. So the point number 1 was set goals. Point number 2, we're already starting to talk about it, is discipline. Be disciplined in reaching your goal. What is it going to take for you to get to that 90-day goal today? What has to get done in order for that to happen? Zig Ziglar says it was character that gets us out of bed. It's commitment that moves us into action. but it's discipline that enables us to follow through. But you know me, everyday God experience leading from the edge. Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 28 says that he that hath no rule over his spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. Wow. Or in 1 Corinthians 9:27 it says, but I keep under my body and bring it to subjection, lest that by any means when I have preached to others, I should be a castaway myself. God doesn't want us to be ruled by our desires or our flesh or our emotions. He wants us to follow sound principles and godly wisdom. And what keeps us in a place of listening is the discipline of our life to be fully submitted to Him. So it's not just good enough to set a goal, but we have to start walking this out in discipline. In fact, in business, it's the exact same thing. When we follow through with what we need to get done to grow, then we find ourselves walking it out in discipline. Or when we push ourselves with our churches to be fully submitted to God's plan and not ruled by our emotions, we're responding out of discipline. Or like I said, I'm in this group of about 20 other men right now that we decided no longer to be subject to our own bodies, and we set goals. And with that group, we've set 75 days of discipline. Every day we have to do 2 days of workout, two workouts a day. We have to follow our diet with no cheat days or cheat meals or cheat snacks. We have to drink a gallon of water. We're reading the Word and praying for each other every day. And we have to have 10 pages of personal development. And if we forget even the smallest thing, in fact, there was one of our group members was only on day 2, and they went to bed without finishing their gallon of water. In fact, they saw the gallon of water, brought it to their bedroom so they wouldn't forget it, and still fell asleep. And guess what that meant? If it's disciplined, and they were so proud of them, they reported to the group, I have to start over at day 1 because I didn't finish my water. And I think it was less than 8 ounces of water. But what is it teaching us? It teaches us that we are supposed to be disciplined people. And why? We're wanting to be able to predict better. It helps us break through the ceiling. It helps us grow. To be better disciplined in order to be able to make better decisions. Right? So point number 1 is we have to set goals. Second point is we have to have discipline. And the third point is we have to revisit this regularly and at a high frequency. And what does that look like and why? Let me speak to the why first. The reason why is that when we revisit our commitments, we end up staying more on track with them because it's human nature to procrastinate. If we make a 90-day goal and we only visit that goal once a month, we will end up rushing all the way up into the end in order to accomplish it. And that's even if we accomplish the goal. But if we meet and see it once a week, it is proven it is 6 times more likely to be accomplished. Simply by looking at it on a weekly basis. 6 times more likely to be accomplished. That's huge. What does it look like? Well, in business or in church, that would be having a weekly meeting where you literally report on your goals, on your rocks with your leadership team. Weekly, not monthly, as in every week, right? As in same time, same place, and you only miss if you're dead or you're on vacation. And I know that sounds funny, but it's so critical. It's critical to our success. It's critical to us in our relationship with God the same way. When we visit regularly with God, He's able to speak into our goals and speak into what we're doing. When we visit regularly with our goals and with our leadership team, we're doing the exact same thing. It stays in front of us. It's putting that rock in the jar first, not at the end. When everything else gets done, hopefully I get to that goal. Hopefully I get to making those changes in our church. Hopefully I get to making those changes in my business. Hopefully I'll be able to, on Fridays I'll work on dreaming about what we can do different. Or on Friday afternoons, I will I will spend time in professional development and will make sure that our business is making decisions that are great. I'll work on the business on Friday instead of being in the business. Let me tell you what happens. Friday afternoon, you have so many things on your plate that were just the extra stuff that you end up never doing that piece, right? Point number 3 is to revisit it regularly. How does all that help us predict? How does setting goals, having discipline, and visiting it regularly help us predict? Well, one, it causes us to keep track of what we're measuring, what we're setting our goals for. Because the better we know what we have done, the better we become at predicting. The better that we can reflect on where we've been and what we're aiming for, the better we'll get at knowing what we can actually accomplish in that time frame. For some people listening to this podcast, you have no idea what you can accomplish in 90 days. And some of you will set a goal that's actually a year-long goal and there's no way to get it done in 90 days, but you won't know that until you try. Or there's some of you out there that will set a 90-day goal and you get it done in a week and a half. But you won't know that until you try. And so what does predicting do for hitting the ceiling? Well, it makes available your best efforts and it pulls together the best information in order to have the best solution to getting back into growth and back into a time where you're able to thrive in what you're doing, whether it's in church, whether it's in business, whether it's in your life, whether it's with your family. To be able to predict what you're going to be able to do and to put the right things in the right place is part of how we break through the ceiling. So back to my group of guys who are working on discipline. I'm on day 4, and I am super excited about bringing this next level of discipline into my life. I'll be honest with you, day 1 and 2 were easy. Some of you guys are laughing because you're saying day 4 of 75 days. Yes, I'm on day 4 of 75 days, right? But day 1 and 2 were not easy. Were easy. Day 4, not so much. In fact, when I get done with this podcast, I have to go running. And one of the 2 workouts that we have to do during this has to be outside. And it is raining right now. And that's not an excuse. I have to go do my exercises. So day 4, not so much fun. But I'll tell you what is exciting. I have 4 days of success behind me. Well, 3.5 days. And all I have is 71 more days to learn how to love it. So what's leadership? What does leading from the edge look like? Well, leadership, in my opinion, means that every day you are striving to be at least one step ahead. At least one experience in front of those that you have been given the gift of leading. It's not a matter of being the best, and it's not a badge that you get to wear. In fact, it's not about being the brightest. It's about having the courage to lead. It takes commitment, it takes persistence, and it takes patience. But above all, it takes an everyday God experience. I'm Benjamin Stewart, and until next time, go lead from the edge.